Hello, I'm Christine Rendel, and this is Voices of Calm. Verlyn Klinkenborg is a writer, an academic, a conservationist, a lecturer at Yale University, and also a farmer. He's published many essays and articles in places like The New Yorker, Harper's, National Geographic, and he's the author of a number of books observing and chronicling the beauty of everyday life. He was a long-time member of the New York Times editorial board, and legions of readers have delighted in his essays on the rural life that appeared for many years in the New York Times. It's with his very kind permission that I'm reading from his book, The Rural Life, a year-long meditation on the deep joys of country life. Here's a passage from March. To northern gardeners, this time of year is full of anxious pleasure. Even as they daydream about the botanical pleasures of June and July, ordinary mortals find themselves nearly defeated by the gardening deadlines that pass so swiftly in March. Extraordinary mortals, whose seeds arrived 2 months ago, whose windows are now full of seedlings, and who are ready to sow peas and carrots the instant the soil thaws, will suffer torments of their own when the perfections they're planning somehow fail to germinate or blossom. A garden is just a way of mapping the strengths and limitations of your personality onto the soil. It would be too much to bear if nature didn't temper a gardener's ambition or laziness with her own unsolicited abundance. March has been oscillating wildly. One day the horses were lying on bare earth in the warm afternoon sun. The next day they stood with their rumps into a wind that was blotting the tree line with horizontal snow. 5 inches fell, and again it was possible to follow coyote tracks across a field to a spot where the coyote had dug out a vole. At the edge of a small stream, a weasel had left muddy footprints where it climbed the snowy bank. This is the season when people with livestock begin counting bales in the barn, wondering if they can hold out till the pastures green up or the first cutting of hay has been made. Farmers aren't ploughing yet, but at 6:15 on a recent morning, I saw a farmer spreading manure on his cornfields, throwing clods and exhalations of steam into the air behind the tractor. The light had come up early. It's the season for that too. And the very sight of that farmer at work seemed full of hope, a reminder that the soil will thaw, peas and carrots will get sown, and one way or another, the garden will grow. Provident rural residents are already at work, preparing next winter's woodpile. Perhaps it's an unwritten rule of the season: stack next winter's wood before you dig this summer's garden. Or perhaps the splitting and stacking of wood is tied to the rising of sap in the sugar maples and the sudden appearance of sap buckets hanging in the woods. There's a keen moral pleasure in knowing that firewood split and stacked and sheltered from the weather in March will burn with abandon in November. Less provident rural residents will buy so-called seasoned wood in September. They'll be plagued all winter long with damp logs and dull fires. When the weather turns sharply colder, their woodpiles will freeze into a single lump. The lump of firewood beside our house has finally thawed, and an ant, the true harbinger of warm weather, made its way across the bedroom wall and down the page of a book a few days ago. If this time of year is rich in anything, it's rich in expectancy. Everything in nature seems ready to stir, and yet the only thing visibly stirring so far is daylight itself, which is steadily undoing winter. Cold weather has kept the lid on the garden, and the few ambitious shoots that have shown to date seem to be thinking better of it. Ice returns now and then to the small pond in a nearby field. The air looks warm, but it isn't yet. What remains most wintry still is the sound of the world at dusk. The chainsaws and axes and hydraulic wood splitters stop their work. The traffic dies away, and everything falls silent. A dog barks in the distance, and a white pine creaks. A train rumbles by just beyond the hill to the north, and eventually the last freight car clatters out of earshot. Then nothing. The nothingness is audible only because it's just about time to listen for the peepers. They'll begin some night before long, with a few reedy notes, which will turn, all too swiftly, into uproariousness. Then it won't be possible to remember the quiet of these nights just before the peepers begin. The night sky will suddenly look warmer, more intimate. Orion and Taurus, the winter constellations, will skid into early morning. Humans like to read their own reluctance into the seasons around them. But it's a headlong world in the country. And though most rural residents are provident, not everyone is provident in quite the same way. Some people plan for the winter, and some people plan for the spring. That was an excerpt from The Rural Life by Verlyn Klinkenborg, to whom I'm most grateful for his kind permission to let me read from it. I'm Christine Rendel. You've been listening to Voices of Calm. Thanks for joining me.